Hi, welcome to Chapter 2 and Defining and Measuring Crime for CCJ 230. All right, we're going to be going over crimes by law. So, first of all, we have crimes against the state we're going to look at. So, some of those crimes are treason, sedition, and we also have the crimes that are broken up generally. So when you talk about crimes, you don't always say, hey, here's all of the crimes. So, for example, when I was in law enforcement, um, and you went out, you'd say, what type of crime was it? And you would have crimes against persons or crimes against properties. And if you had a big enough law enforcement, when you became a detective, if that's where you want to go, you would work in the crimes against persons or crimes against property. So, for example, crimes against persons would be murder, rape, sexual assault, kidnapping, robbery, assault, battery. So, this is not an all inclusive list, it's just some examples. So, it's a crime that is committed against a person, and they're generally seen as more severe because they're committed against a person. It's something that happens against a person. So it's a murder where somebody kills another person, or it's a rape where somebody rapes another person. Then we have crimes against habitation. So that could be burglary or arson. And then we have crimes against property. So that would be larceny or forgery or fraud. Crimes against public order, so that's disturbing the peace, inciting a riot. And again, these are different depending what state you're in. So it all varies because we have different laws in the United States. There's laws, federal laws. So those are laws that no matter what state you live in, no matter what city you live in, you can break a federal law. There's also laws that are per what state you live in. So if you live in Oregon, we have the Oregon Revised Statutes. And so if you live in a certain state, you can break that law. In Nevada, for example, there's the Nevada Revised Statutes. You can break those laws in the state of Nevada, and in California, and in Washington, so on and so forth. And then in every municipality, so in a certain city or a certain county, there's laws as well. So as you're starting to see, it's different. So these are just giving you a broad overview of how there is crimes by law. But remember, it's different depending where you are, and what jurisdiction you are, depending if it's federal, depending if it's within the state, depending if it's within a municipality, a city, or a county. And again, they vary by degrees. So depending where you're at, if you're in a county or state, there's different degrees to depending how you're going to be tried, and that's at the court level. All right, so there's crimes against public morals. That's your prostitution, gambling, drug crimes, public drunkenness, assisted suicide. All right. Also, one thing to note is in the state of Oregon, for example, there's classification of crimes. So there's misdemeanors and there's felonies. So a misdemeanor is punishable up to a year in jail and a fine. And jail is somewhere that's very different than prison, because prison is where you go if you commit a felony, and a felony is punishable where you go if you serve more than a year if you're sentenced. So when somebody says, oh, I was sentenced to jail, again, that's somewhere you go right when you're arrested. It's where they book you. It's where they take your fingerprints, where they get all your information. It's where bail is set. You go for an initial hearing. But if you are sentenced to a felony and there is a trial by a jury, and for example, if you were charged with a robbery and a jury found you guilty and you were sentenced to 5 years in prison, you go to prison, not jail. But there's other states that have more than just the classification of crimes of a misdemeanor and a felony. They have what's called a gross misdemeanor. So it's kind of that middle of the road. So for example, in Nevada, where I was from, for example, for what we call larceny or theft, if you stole something, depending on the monetary value, you could be convicted of a gross misdemeanor. So if you stole something at the time, and things might have changed because I've been gone for over a decade, but if you stole something up to $249.99, it was a misdemeanor, which means you could have a fine, you could spend up to a year in jail. If it was anywhere between $250 to $4,999.99, it was a gross misdemeanor and you could go to prison for it. And if it was $5,000 or more, it was a felony. Or things like carrying a concealed weapon hidden on your body unless you had a permit, that was a gross misdemeanor. So again, depending what state you're in or municipality, everything's a little bit different. All right, so violent crime. Again, it generally involves a criminal action against another person. And that's because whenever it's a person instead of property, it's heightened. And violent crime is responsible for much of the public's fear about crime and victimization. Acts are much less common than other forms of crime. All right, murder. So murder does involve the killing of one human being by another. And it's the least common type of crime, even though you think it's the most common because of the media. The reason the media it portrays so much is because that's what gets the most, attention. I mean, if we said, hey, look, another car was broken into, it doesn't get that much attention. You don't pay that much attention, but murder does. And when there's a movie out, obviously, if they did a movie about somebody breaking into somebody's car, it's not that interesting, but murder does. So obviously we understand why, but if I tell you it's not that common, it's obviously doesn't get that much attention. It obviously does carry with it the most serious penalty, and an offender may be put to death as a punishment in some regions, depending if they have the death penalty or not in that state. And there are different degrees of classifications of murder, depending what state you're in and jurisdiction. All right, so you have, right now you have the link to a description of a first degree murder, and you can click on this and go listen to this. It's pretty short, it's just 30 seconds, but this kind of describes what first degree murder is. In some jurisdictions, the shooting of a police officer is considered first degree murder, even if it's not planned, because the person is a law enforcement officer. First degree murder generally needs to be willful and premeditated. Planning, lying in wait. So they planned, they waited for the person. And again, if it has to do with a law enforcement officer, or if somebody robbed the person, committed rape or burglary or kidnapping, that's also generally when they can add first degree murder. All right, second degree murder. Again, I've added a link where you can go watch a description of that. That is an intentional killing that is not premeditated or planned, nor committed in the reasonable heat of passion, and it's killing caused by a dangerous conduct and the offender's obvious lack or concern of human life. Sometimes I'll give you a hint on what you may see in a quiz, and I definitely remember that you will see what the definition of first and second degree murder is, and involuntary and voluntary manslaughter, so you'll want to remember these for a future quiz or exam. All right, second degree murder may best be viewed as the middle ground between first degree and voluntary manslaughter. All right, voluntary manslaughter, again, here's a link for you to go watch. No premeditation. It can occur in the heat of the moment. Circumstances would cause a reasonable person to be emotionally or mentally disturbed, such as domestic violence or rape. And again, if you need to write this down, you can always pause the video. Involuntary manslaughter usually refers to an unintentional killing that results from reckless or criminal negligence, or from an unlawful act that is a misdemeanor or low-level felony, such as driving under the influence, such as alcohol. The victim's death is generally unintended, such as you go to a bar, you are drinking, with friends, you get in a car, you drive, and you get into an accident, and somebody in the other car is killed, or you hit somebody that is crossing in a crosswalk and they are killed. All right, sexual assault. So this is kind of the umbrella, the picture I'm showing you of sexual violence. It's any sexual behavior that happens without a person's consent, and underneath that umbrella is kind of everything that's covered under sexual violence. And I've also put a link there of statutory rape. It's really one of the misunderstood forms of sexual violence. It's where somebody of a certain age has consensual sex with somebody that's under 18, and because they're under 18, depending on the state they live and what age they're at, some states will allow it, some don't. Say, hey, they're not old enough to give consent, so we call that statutory rape. So there is a link there where you can go see what state you're in to make sure you understand what statutory rape is. All right, so this goes over what the definition is of rape, sexual assault, as far as laws prohibiting sexual contact with someone who is unable, again, to consent due to intoxication or a disability. And then again, statutory rape that involves someone that is legally unable to consent due to their age. All right, and then we have assault, which involves the physical harm or threat of physical harm of a victim. It's the most common form of violent crime. And we have divided that into two categories. We have a simple assault, which generally does not involve the use of a weapon, and minor injuries, if there are any injuries, and aggravated assault, which may involve a serious injury to the victim or the use of a weapon. And then we have robbery. It involves taking personal property through the use of force or fear. All right, another thing you're going to see on the quiz. All too often, I will hear people say, my house was robbed, or somebody's house was robbed. Well, first of all, as you can see right now, just in that picture, that is a robbery. Somebody is being robbed. They are, through the use of fear of a gun being pointed at their head, property is being taken from them, their money. And so therefore, if their house is being robbed, how is their house in fear? So right there, we know it's not a robbery. So whenever you are not home and you come home and your house has been broken into and your personal property has been taken, that is called a burglary. So we'll get to that. So a robbery is, again, when somebody threatens you. They can even have their gun being their hand in their pocket, and they can say, I have a gun or I have a knife, and if you don't give me the money in your wallet or your ring or your purse or whatever, I'm going to take my gun out and shoot you. That's, again, using force or fear to give, so that you'll give them something. That is a robbery. And again, that is not burglary. So that's something you might want to remember for the quiz. And it does involve a face-to-face confrontation. That's why it's not a burglary, and that's why your house is not burglarized. Okay, a burglary is when you're not home, somebody breaks into your house, if you are home but you don't see the person break into your house, that's still a burglary. If you are home, that's called a home invasion. And it can be called different things in different jurisdictions, but it occurs when someone enters a building or other physical space with the intent of taking property without your permission. It doesn't require that anything be taken, and it is the act of entering without permission that constitutes the crime. All right, and then what about trespassing? So burglary is a felony in most jurisdictions. Trespassing is a misdemeanor in most jurisdictions. So generally, the first time somebody comes onto your property, an officer won't arrest them because they have to be warned. So generally, how do we do that? Well, a couple ways we do that. One way we do that is you tell them, hey, you're on my property, meaning not inside your house, but on your property. And you say, hey, I'm warning you, if you come back on my property, I'm going to call the police. Okay. So that's one way to warn them. Another way people warn people is they put up trespassing signs, and they have fences up, and they have ways that make it really obvious that They're on somebody's property that they shouldn't be, and they're going to be arrested. That's why you see no trespassing signs, and people make it really, really, really obvious that they're going to be arrested. So that's where no trespassing signs have really started. I used to, a lot of times, you would have people in Walmart, whenever they would steal something, or a local grocery store or something, they couldn't just go there and say, I want this person trespassed. They would have to actually say, okay, I took a picture of this person. We officially read them the trespass warning, and they were officially trespassed. And if they came on the property after that, they could be arrested for a misdemeanor trespassing, but they can't just be arrested the first time for trespassing. It's generally not how it works. All right, property offenses. The most common criminal offense that involves taking or damaging of physical goods are your property offenses. And within property crime classification are several types of crimes. First, we have larceny theft. So that's really the most common: shoplifting or theft or stealing from motor vehicles. And I have to say, I see it all the time in the Valley. You'll hear burglary thefts, which is stealing something from inside somebody's car. You hear of people leaving things in their cars, number one, and leaving their cars unlocked. People are looking for that easy victim. So they're looking for what we call the triangle of crime. So if I was to, on your screen right now, imagine, or if I was to draw a triangle, imagine a triangle of crime right now. And so if you're looking for that, the three dots on a triangle, you're looking for if you have a suspect, if you have the time, and you have the victim there. If all those things are there, you're gonna have a crime occur. And so if you have a suspect walking around in an area and they see a car parked there and nobody's around, and they look in that car and they see a phone, or they see a computer, or they see change, or they see a dollar bill, and they just try the handle on the car and it's open, then that's an opportunity. And so they're going to take it. So I always tell people, lock your car doors. If you don't have tinted windows, or you do have tinted windows but they're easy to see in, don't leave property in your car. Or if you don't have anywhere else to leave it, hide it. Put it in a trunk. Put something over it where it's not easily seen, or not a blanket where somebody's going to go, what's under that blanket? Another thing I ask people is, do you have anything in your car or in your house that is important to you? It doesn't even have to be valuable. It just could be important. It could be a ring that's just unique, that was given to you by somebody that you don't ever want to be taken or lose, or have taken or stolen from you. And I always have people raise their hands when we're in class, or whenever I teach a class, or whenever I was a cop. And I say to that person, do you have a picture of it? And they always go, no. And I go, do you have a smartphone? And most everybody today has some type of smartphone that takes a photo. And I always say, it's so sad, because I can't tell you how many times I took burglary reports, and I would have to take a police report and do a property page of each item that was stolen. And it was always so sad, because I knew that probably 95 or even higher percent of the time, within a few years, or even probably sooner, but I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt, we would recover most of the property, either, at the pawn shop most of the time, or just in somebody's room, or somewhere we recover the property that was stolen. However, we couldn't get it back to the owners, because how do I know that that's your item? How do I know that's your ring? How do I know that's your phone? How do I know that's your bicycle? Because you can tell me that's your Schwinn bike. You can tell me that's your gold ring. You can tell me that's your UGG shoes. But so did the other 10 people that had their UGG shoes and their Schwinn bikes and their gold rings stolen. If you don't have some identifying way to identify it, like a serial number or even a photo of it, I can't return it to you, because how do I determine if it's yours compared to somebody else's? So at a minimum, go take 5 minutes right now, and if something's really important to you, go take a few photos of it. So if anything ever does happen, and unfortunately it is stolen, you have a way to get it returned to you. So please do that. Please take my advice right there. All right. So I just gave you a little hint. All right. Also, vandalism, destruction. That's obviously done. Smashing of storefront windows during a riot, or just somebody that's important to you gets mad at you and destroys something because they're mad. Arson, obviously. All right. We have what's called status offenses, and you'll see this on a quiz. What is a status offense? Well, it's basically something that's only considered illegal for those of a certain group. Generally, it's those that are under 18. So, for example, I'm over 18, so I can't be charged with curfew violation. So I can go out at 2 a.m. and it's not illegal for me. However, if somebody was 14 years old, it would be. Or I can't be charged with minor in possession of alcohol. However, if somebody's 18, they can be charged with minor in possession of alcohol. So, anyhow, some examples are truancy, underage consumption of alcohol, or even running away from home. However, if it is a status offense, that's not something that law enforcement take to jail. We put people in jail. There's generally homes that juveniles can walk away from. It's just for their safety. If we can't find a parent or a guardian to take those children, because generally a lot of times when law enforcement comes into contact with those juveniles, it's after hours, it's early morning hours. So if we can't find a parent or guardian, it's generally just a safe place to keep those juveniles. The unfortunate thing is if the juvenile does walk out of those places, because they are not jails, we don't have a place to keep them where it is under lock and key. So if they do walk away, that's the hard part, is saying, hey, we're here to keep you safe, just stay here until we can get you to a parent or guardian. All right, we also have what we call those victimless crimes. So acts that are considered illegal under the law, but don't involve victims under the traditional sense. So drug use, prostitution, gambling. You have a lot of people out there who say, hey, let it occur. It doesn't hurt anybody. It only affects the people who do it. And if they want to do it, let them do it. You have certain countries, like places like Amsterdam, that do it and think we should do it. So there's all kinds of controversies and people out there. We're not going to argue it in this class, but people out there think, hey, it should happen, and why are we spending all this money trying to stop it? And then we also have white collar crimes that say, hey, all these things happen, and why are we out there trying to stop people and putting people in jail for stealing food when you have people embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars and getting away with it and nothing's happening to them, especially with tech-based offenses and insider trading and all these things going on. So, all kinds of things are happening, and it opens up the door for all kinds of discussion in other classes that we don't have time to get in here, but I do want to open your eyes to it, that it's pretty amazing. All right, we also have crimes against the government and terrorism, and those are typically punished under federal law. And there's treason and espionage, and like I said, terrorism, and there's a whole classes on those. So again, we're not going to get into those here, but again, just opening your eyes to how much in the American criminal justice system there really is out there. All right, so a lot to go over here and a lot to ponder, and hopefully really starting you to think about the American criminal justice system and about the three-pronged system that we're really going to start getting into. And I will start going back to a lot as far as the cops, the courts, and the correction system. And so again, I'll go back to that a lot, the three-pronged system of the American criminal justice system of cops, courts, and corrections. All right, I'll see you for the next video.